It was almost midnight when I finally found a place to spend the night. I had been hitchhiking for a few days, going from one city to another, and the fatigue was starting to set in when I spotted a motel ahead. The motel was small, with a blinking neon sign and weak lighting. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at the place, and thought that anything was better than continuing to drive. The place didn't look like much, but it was quiet, and had that feel of a forgotten spot in time. I went to the reception and paid in advance, without much conversation. The attendant seemed a little sleepy. He handed me the key, pointed to the hallway, and said the room was number 12. I grabbed the stuff that was on the passenger seat, entered the room, and tossed my backpack on the bed. The room was simple but clean, with the smell of disinfectant mixed with the usual dampness of older motels. The bed was one of those with a firm mattress, but at least it had a white sheet. On the nightstand there was a rotary phone and a dim lamp, as if trying to make me relax. I was already hungry, so I grabbed some change and decided to check out the snack machines in the parking lot. I walked over there, not in a hurry. The lights at the motel were weak, and the hum of the fluorescent lamps at the soda machine reminded me of an old movie. I grabbed a bag of chips and a can of soda, and when I turned to go back, I saw a man standing on the other side of the parking lot. He was motionless, standing, just watching me. I stared for a second, trying to figure out what he was doing there, but he didn't seem to be doing anything strange, just staring at me. I thought maybe he was another guest, maybe waiting for a taxi or something, so I shrugged and headed back to my room. But as soon as I got there, I started to feel something strange, like he was still there, watching me. I took a look through the window just to make sure I wasn't imagining things, and there he was, standing exactly where I left him, but now he was closer to my room. There wasn't much to see beyond the empty parking lot and the glow of the streetlights, but still, the feeling of being watched made me a little tense. I quickly closed the curtain and tried to ignore what was going on, but something told me he was still out there. Time passed, and I started to feel pressure on my chest, like something was about to happen. I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and took a deep breath, trying to calm my mind. It wasn't the first time I'd seen things in strange places. The exhaustion, the long travels, they mess with your head. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from the window. It wasn't loud, but I could hear it clearly. It was like a scratching, something tapping against the glass. My heart raced. I froze for a moment. The sound repeated, and I knew it wasn't the wind. I walked up to the window, and with the curtain closed, I peeked through a crack. The image of the man was there again, even closer now, staring directly at me. He was so close that I could see the shadow of his face reflected in the weak light from the street lamp. The feeling of terror was instant. I stood there, not knowing what to do. I didn't want to go out and confront the guy, but I couldn't let him keep watching me either. My thoughts were a mess, and I only managed to make a decision when I heard another noise. This time, someone was knocking on the door. A sharp knock, followed by a pause, then more knocks, louder. My body froze. I was paralyzed, trying to decide what to do. Without thinking twice, I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I grabbed my phone from the backpack and dialed the police number, but before I could press the call button, the knocking stopped. I stayed there, in the dark, in silence, waiting for the sound to return. I didn't know if I was hallucinating or if there was really someone outside, but the fear was consuming me. I heard a distant noise like the man was walking away. I peeked through the bathroom door crack and after a while decided to look out the window again. He wasn't there anymore. I didn't know what to think. I tried to calm myself, but the tension didn't go away. I knew the guy had left, but the feeling that he was still watching me lingered. His car was still parked in the same spot. I spent the rest of the night awake, in the dark, waiting for the time to leave. I kept listening for any sound from outside, the wind, the distant noise of a car passing on the road. I didn't know what had happened, and I didn't know if it was real or if my mind was just trying to cope with the exhaustion. But I didn't want to stay there to find out. As soon as dawn came, I decided to leave the room and see if everything was okay. The receptionist was there, with his face still a little swollen from sleep. I didn't know if he had noticed anything strange during the night, so I asked him, "Do you have other guests registered for tonight?" He looked at the computer, moving the cursor back and forth. "No, sir, just you." I didn't know what to do with this information. The man had been there, but he wasn't registered. No one had seen him, and now there was nothing left. Just me, the empty motel, and the car parked. Nothing made sense. I never went back to that motel after that. When I got in my car and drove away, I felt like I had escaped something I would never understand. I don't know what the man wanted or if he was real, but I'll never forget his stare. I was heading home after a long, exhausting day. I had gone to my mom's house out in Albany, a small town in upstate New York. The road was calm, but I could barely keep my eyes open. It was late, and I knew I wouldn't make it home without stopping. The sleepiness was hitting hard, so I decided to pull over at the first place I saw to get some rest. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a place to lay my head for a bit. That's when I saw the motel about 5 minutes off the main road. It was on the edge of US Route 9, a road that passes through several small towns around here. It was an old place with a neon sign flickering saying, "Motel Open" in big red letters. When I walked in, the reception was nearly empty. There was only the attendant behind the desk with a strange look on his face. He didn't seem bothered, just looked at me and asked what I needed. I wasn't in the mood for a long conversation, so I told him I just needed a room to sleep for a few hours. The kind of place where you pay and forget the name of the motel the next morning. He handed me the key, and I headed straight for the room, which was at the back of the parking lot. The room wasn't anything special. A simple bed, a small bathroom, an old office chair, nothing to write home about. But I wasn't there for sightseeing, so I didn't mind. I just wanted to rest. I threw myself on the bed and lay there for a few minutes, just trying to relax and let my body rest. The place was quiet, except for the distant sound of the road. When I reached for the TV remote, I noticed the landline next to the bed was off the hook. Without thinking, I put it back in place, thinking someone had used it and forgotten to hang it up. As soon as I did, the phone rang. Once, twice, until I finally picked it up. I thought it was the motel attendant since I'd just put the phone back in place. But on the other end, I heard a man's voice. It was deep and hoarse, like he was speaking through something heavy, like he was grumbling. He said, "Why did you come back?" I stood there, frozen, listening. The guy sounded like he knew me, but his voice was strange, like it had been recorded or something. But I didn't think much of it. Probably just some prank from a weirdo. I hung up and left the phone alone. But the phone rang again. This time, when I answered, all I heard was heavy breathing. The weirdness intensified. It wasn't normal, and I was starting to feel uncomfortable. My body tensed up. I decided to unplug the phone, but before I could do that, I heard a noise at the door. Someone was knocking. I got up from the bed, I looked through the curtain's crack, but I didn't see anyone. I asked through the door as firmly as I could, "Who's there?" But there was no answer. The knocking continued, persistent. I was starting to get anxious, and the atmosphere in the room felt strange, like there was something in the air I couldn't explain. The knocks were soft, but continuous. They seemed to come from far away, but at the same time very close. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my things and headed straight for the bathroom. Climbing out of the window didn't seem like an option, but I already had the feeling that the room was no longer a safe place. Before I left, I tried one last peek through the door, but no one was there. The door was locked. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I needed to leave. I went to the reception and spoke with the attendant. He looked even stranger than before, like he was totally oblivious to what I had just gone through. I told him someone had been knocking at the door and that I had heard a strange voice on the phone. He looked at me, slightly annoyed, and replied that no one had called the room, that the line wasn't even connected, and that there was no one in the area. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to think. The attendant kept staring at me, and I felt like he didn't care about what I was saying. I went back to the car, my mind full of unanswered questions. The motel seemed normal on the surface, but something was off. I drove home, feeling a strange sensation in my stomach. During the drive, I kept thinking about what had happened, trying to find a rational explanation. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation. I had left because I no longer felt comfortable there. And I don't know if I'll ever understand what really happened that night.